Humanitarian crisis. Nothing about this world we live in today seems humane. We all, meaning all nationalities, need to be anti racist by re examining the social structures that we support, rethinking our implicit core beliefs about race and interracial social relations, and working with our BIPOC, Black Indigenous People of Color, our peers against systemic racism. Making conscious decisions towards anti racism will contribute to building an equal and equitable society for all. The USSR, decades after it was established, the Russian dominated Soviet Union grew into one of the world's most powerful and influential states and eventually encompassed 15 republics, which included Ukraine. In 1928, Stalin forced civilizations the replacement of private farms with state run collective farms on Soviet Russian populations at the cost of millions of lives. So between 1939 and 1941, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union were allies. Stalin actually provided very substantial support to the Nazi Germany from 1934 to 1938. Stalin cruelly purged the Soviet Party government's armed forces and intelligentsia. Excuse me. Millions of enemies, the people, were imprisoned, exiled, or shot, so that the outsiders um, of the world observed, and many Nazis as well, were shocked, even disoriented by the short lived Nazi Soviet pact of 1939. This was before Hitler's rise to power. Um, you know, the ideology of Marxism Leninism in the Nazi book burnings of 1933 was self evident, giving the bloody street battles between and Germany, Nazi and Germany communists. So you see, the ideology has always been the same. Sure, there are probably anti racist human beings in Russia and Ukraine, as well as all the nations of the world, but all the nations, or should I say, people in power of all the nations throughout time, have been capable of injustice, discrimination, destruction, tyranny, manipulation, and straight, basically, seeking power and control over the people in the land. Um, it's basically they want to manipulate, the thought process of the people for obedience through fear. I am not a historian, but I know somewhat about history because, I want to know. So I try and do my own research and investigate. Soviet Socialist Republic, SSR, or the USSR. From 1922 until 1991, Ukraine was the informal name of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic within the Soviet Union. Communism, a political theory derived from Karl Marx, advocating class war and leading to a society in which all property in publicly owned I'm sorry, all property is publicly owned, and each person works and is paid according to their abilities and needs. Socialism, a political and economic theory of social organization which advocates that the means of production, distribution, and exchange should be owned or regulated by the community as a whole, basically to revert our way of living to the past traditions of ideology of Babylonian man. That the idea that one human being is better than the next human being, that someone basically needs to hold your hand like you're a child and tell you what to do. simply because you don't have a voice of your own. Oh, what does that sound like? It sounds, yeah. Anyway, basically, white dominance, white supremacy, or just white power, that somehow um, someone seeking asylum that is granted asylum based on the color of their that someone seeking asylum is only based that someone seeking asylum is only granted asylum based on the color of their skin. Really? um I mean, it just doesn't stop, you know what I mean? um it was that let me see. um Lost my place, of course. um Someone seeking asylum that is protection granted by a nation to someone who has left their native country as a political refugee is only granted asylum based on the color of their skin. Black people say, "Open the door or we will die." Africans reported racism and hostility trying to flee Ukraine. Fake news reports say that there is no discrimination um, based on race or nationality when it comes to crossing the borders by foreign citizens. It's a first come, first served basis. I mean, look, Ukraine is 99.9% white in population. The country of Ukraine is 99.9% white. Um, Officials were holding groups of black people with barricades. Africans were being denied passage on trains leaving Ukraine to cross the Polish border. Um, they were trying to cross the border into Poland, and a 25-year-old African man reported that he was among thousands of African people hoping to flee Ukraine, and they were kicked off of trains. They were told Ukrainians only, but they were not checking passports. They were only picking white people, he said. African citizens leaving Ukraine were met with racist discrimination and abuse at the border. Videos show proof of that. Officials appearing, Ukrainian officials appearing to threaten to shoot groups of African students, and showing them being kicked off of trains that were not full. Um, they were ordered off of buses to make room for Ukrainian nationals, and they were left stranded at border towns, as well as being baton beaten and abused, basically unjust treatment, inhumane treatment. There were groups of Ukrainian officials barricading passage of groups of black people trying to break through, and seek safety to the border. Um, the Africans were pushing and pushing, defying Ukrainian officials' orders. They basically broke through barricades and were chased with batons. They were beaten, like I said, threatened to be shot, but they didn't care. They were pushing forward, running basically for their lives. And then, after they got through the barricades, they walked at least 30 minutes until they got to the Polish border. It's basically slavery reborn all over again. Or should I say, slavery that never went anywhere, because black Americans here today deal with slavery on a regular basis. You know, um, it's no different than the long lasting effects of slavery throughout the systematic structure of the world. This is no different than the long lasting legacy of the great migration of history. How the southern landowners tried to restrict the great migration and keep the black people from migrating from the south. Um, The Great Migration was one of the largest movements of people in the United States history. Basically, one of the largest movements of black people in the United States history. Approximately 6 million black people moved from America, from the American South to northern Midwest and Midwestern, or should I say Western states, um, roughly from 1910 to 1970. The driving force behind the mass movement was to escape racial violence and pursue economic and educational opportunities. You know, and obtain freedom from the oppression of the Jim Crow era. Basically, the Great Migration is broken down into two phases, coinciding with the participation and effects of the United States in both World War One and Two.